What's going on, guys? Back at it again with a brand new companion build here for you guys on the channel. As you can see right in front of you, this one is going to be on Miss Isobel DPS. Now, full disclosure, I wanted to get started on these companion builds that came for these two new companions that came with High Isle. However, I ended up getting very sick. Ended up getting hospitalized and then in turn needed surgery. Therefore, I actually had to postpone some of these companion builds until after I got better, which is today. I am very excited to jump into this one, guys. As you can see, she does have a two-handed weapon, in particular a maul. Therefore, I decided to call this build the Mauler. She is fantastic in this build, guys. She does pretty decent amount of damage, and you know what? She ends up being a very good companion to have with you if you desire a DPS type companion. So with that being said, I kind of want to just jump into this one, guys. If you're excited just as much as I am, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, let's jump right into this. So first things first, on her number 1 bar, or slot, she has Sunbrand. Sunbrand reads as, Isobel DPS hurls a blazing ball of fire at an enemy dealing 10,365 flame damage on impact and an additional 7,768 flame damage over 8 seconds. I thought this skill was really good for this build in particular, because not only does it do a pretty healthy amount of damage up front at 10,365 damage, fire damage at that, but it also does a damage over time for the period of 8 seconds, which is an additional 7,768 damage, which ends up being a pretty hefty amount of damage for the duration of that period. This skill is pretty fantastic, and I do recommend it on almost every single DPS build, if I'm being completely honest, only because it does a pretty significant amount of damage. Moving on, well, actually, you know what? The cooldown is at 11.6 because of her companion passive, which is Enchanted, decreases ability cooldown by 3% and damage taken by 3%. So not only does she have the ability to take less damage, which will also in turn help you in the DPS department in the realm of survivability, but her ability cooldowns is just that much better as well because of this passive. So very good to say the least. Moving on, Penetrating Strikes. Penetrating Strikes reads as, Isobel DPS attacks 4 times with Magic Spear, dealing 2,591 magic damage to all enemies in front of them with each strike. After their assault, Isobel DPS grants themselves and nearby allies a boon that increases the damage of their next light attack or heavy attack by 50%. This skill is fantastic, not just for her, but for you as well. So initially, she does that 4 initial attacks of 2,591, which adds up to be pretty good amount of damage. I'm not very good at math off the tip of my head, so I'm not even going to bother. But it does a pretty good amount of damage right up front because of the ability itself. But on top of that, after she casts her ability, all nearby allies will have their next light or heavy attack increased by 50%. So it does have the capabilities of increasing the overall group DPS by just simply having this ability slotted on her. Not only that, but it is a staple of the Templar to have jabs or sweeps, you know, to have it in slotted on your character. So of course, are you really a Templar if you don't have this skill slotted? I don't know, I argue you're not. So but that's of course my opinion. But this, even if it wasn't a staple, this still would be a fantastic skill. I do recommend this. It is a fantastic one, and it does a pretty decent amount of damage. The cooldown, however, is at 15.5 seconds, mainly because of that passive again, but it is on the higher side. But even with that being on the higher side, it does make up with it just because of the amount of damage she does and the option of having that capability of having that extra 50% more damage on your next light or heavy attack. Very good skill to say the least. In the number 3 slot, we have Holy Ground. Holy Ground reads as Isobel Velawal consecrates the ground under them for 8 seconds, healing themselves and nearby allies by 2,175 health every 2 seconds and snaring enemies by 50%. Used when Isobel Velawal or nearby ally is below 75% health or if an enemy is nearby. So this skill does have a contingent on when it's activated, but even with that contingency, it still gets used all the time because either A, your ally, you or your ally has to be under 75%, but the one that makes it, in my opinion, the reason why it gets activated a lot is the second part of that, which is if an enemy is nearby. So you'll see her casting this all the time. So the contingency is not really a problem in the slightest. But what this does essentially is a heal over time for anyone that's inside of the giant circle. It's a fantastic skill to say the least. It's a way to keep not just her alive, but yourself alive. But it also has the added benefit of utility in which it snares enemies that are in the AoE by 50%. Which overall ends up being a very hefty skill to have. Now, again, similar as the penetrating strikes, the cooldown is at 15.5 seconds, but I think it more than makes up for it because of the utility and the healing capabilities and survivability that she is able to have just by having this slotted. Sunder. Sunder reads as Isobel Velawal slices all enemies in front of them with a mighty swing dealing 5,183 physical damage and an additional 5,180 physical damage over 8 seconds. So similarly to the first skill, Sunbrand, this skill also does upfront damage of 5,183, but on top of that it also does a damage over time of 5,180 for an 8 seconds. I did stagger them quite heavily just so that she will always consistently have a damage over time active at any given point, but you'll find that she will consistently actually have them lapped on top of one another, therefore increasing her DPS quite significantly. The good thing about Sunder 2 is that it does have an average cooldown, a little bit better than average cooldown because of her passive, as a matter of fact, at 11.6 seconds, making this a pretty good skill to have on. It is a conal ability, so it only really affects, enemies that are in front of her, but even then, it's still a great ability to have if you're going to be rocking a two-handed weapon on your companion. And here it is, Sunder. Last but not least on the regular bar is Beam of Reproach. It reads as Isobel Velawal bathes an enemy in a beam of sunlight, immediately dealing 5,183 magic damage and healing allies nearby for 4,350 health. The residual light will then continue to heal allies near the enemy for 1,087 health every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. So this skill is good for multiple reasons, right? Not only does it deal a pretty okay amount of damage, magic damage at 5,183, but it also heals allies for 4,350 health, which is a pretty good. Then the residual on top of that, it does magic damage and it heals them, and on top of that it also heals them for 1,087 health every 2 seconds for the period of 8 seconds. This is a pretty fantastic skill. It really does help the survivability of the group, and I do recommend to have this because of its effectiveness. On top of that, the cooldown is only at 11.6, so it's slightly better than average because of her passive. Her passive is a really good one in my opinion, because of the cooldown gets reduced by just that much, So this ends up being a pretty good skill to say the least. As far as the ultimate, companions only have the option of one ultimate. In her case is Baneslayer. Baneslayer reads as, Isobel Velois channels their energy and conjures a weapon made of sunlight before striking downward, dealing 10,365 magic damage to all enemies in front of them. Enemies damaged by Baneslayer have particles remaining on them for 10 seconds that detonate for 5,183 magic damage when a player deals damage to them. Now, this is a pretty fantastic skill, to say the least. The biggest problem that I have with this skill is that when she starts activating this ultimate, she does not turn it off. Whereas Bastion, for example, has an ultimate that's similar to this in the sense that it starts off as a channel before it actually goes off. With Bastion, at bare minimum, if the enemies have been neutralized, he cancels the ultimate, therefore saving the ultimate. She does not. Therefore, if you are dealing massive amounts of DPS and you take out everybody before she's able to complete her ultimate, the ultimate is effectively wasted. And that is unfortunate. I don't know if it's a bug or if it's meant to be that way, even with Bastion. I'm not 100% sure. But the fact of the matter is that it kind of ends up being wasted. But when it does work, this skill is absolutely fantastic. Deals a lot of damage, and the fact that it deals more damage on top of that after, because of the residual particles that's left over by Baneslayer on your next attack and everything, it really does help the overall DPS of yourself and your group. Moving on to gear. So I like to emulate my companions in a similar fashion that I do with my own actual, character builds. And what I mean by that is I like to go with 2 5-piece sets and a 2-piece, which would simulate a monster piece. Of course, we don't have monster sets for companions, so I like to just pretend that that's the case. So we're going to start off with the 2-piece with the helmet and shoulders, which is medium aggressive. Aggressive is a fantastic thing to have on DPS builds because all it does is increases damage done by 1.7% per piece equipped. And of course, this is a 2-piece, so it helps out pretty significantly. Moving on to the first 5-piece set, and is also going to be a 5-piece medium set of aggressive. And again, aggressive increases your damage done by 1.7%. So the 7 body pieces are all aggressive and increases the damage done pretty significantly, which really does help. For the last and final 5-piece, we're going to start off with the jewelry, is shattering, which increases penetration by 1300 for the jewelry, and the weapon is, since it's considered a 2-piece, is 2600. And I went with them all just because it kind of looks good in my opinion. But other than that though, this is the build. Let's go over to the house and see her fashion. In terms of fashion, she's very boring and bland in my opinion, but I think it looks great. When I say boring and bland, I mean with the choices that I decided to go with. Because all it is Breton 4, Breton 4, Breton 4, Curious Breton 4, Breton 4, and Breton 4 on all of her body pieces. In terms of weapon, Breton Maul 4. I kind of wanted to keep the whole Breton aesthetic with her on this specific build, and that's what I went for. In terms of dyes, the first thing I went with was Cyrodiilic Steel, Blood Gold, and then Undaunted Bronze for absolutely everything. Let me know down in the comment section what you guys think in terms of what she looks like. So let's go see if we can find a world boss to solo. So there you guys have it, guys. Isobel is a fantastic DPS companion. As you guys saw for yourself, I never have any problems with any of these companions. They typically do, on average, about 7 to 10k DPS, and this was nothing that really differentiated itself from the other companions in that department. She does about the same amount of damage as all the other companions do, and because of that, in the DPS department you can't really go wrong with any, but in particular you can't go wrong with Isobel because she does just as much, if not a little bit better than some of your other companions. Really thoroughly enjoyed this one, guys. If you guys did too, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.